Good morning. Welcome to Bible study for Sunday, February 7th, 2021. My name is Carolyn Hayes. I'm the Director of Children and Young Families at Gaithersburg Presbyterian Church, and welcome to Bible study. The scriptures that we are covering today, we are still in the Old Testament. We are reading 1 Chronicles, chapters 21 through 29. We're going to finish 1 Chronicles today. We'll pray and then just dive in because we've got a lot to cover. Gracious and loving Lord, thank you for today. Thank you for time spent studying your word and how you revealed yourself and have revealed yourself to people throughout the ages. Help us to learn how things that happened so extremely long ago really do still have bearing in our lives today. Help us to see the lessons and to learn from them. Please bless this study and bless us to thy service. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. So, last week, we finished off with David and his mighty men, his armies having successfully fought off, well, just about everybody and some of the somebodies a couple of times. And then in chapter 21, it takes kind of it's again one of those kind of abrupt changes. It opens up by saying Satan rose up against Israel and incited David to take a census of Israel. It is a very odd sentence. Satan rose up against Israel. Well, according to the notes in my NIV Bible, in both 2 Samuel and 1 Chronicles, the Lord is angry with Israel, not David, and is angry because of the bad old kings, of which there were many. Now, why this incited David to take a census, I don't quite understand. And the taking of the census, taking a census in and of itself is not sinful. However, as one of the notes suggests, if David is taking it to prove to himself and to others how powerful he is and powerful his armies are apart from the Lord, that's where I think he's going south. It's prideful. It shows him trusting in things of the world and not God. Though, in any case, Joab did go out and count everybody, and he counted 1,100,000 fighting men. And that doesn't count the Levites and the Benjamites who don't fight. They're the priestly castes. God is thoroughly angered by this action, and David knows it. David turns to God, begging for forgiveness. And God, speaking through Gad, David's seer, tells him that David has 3 options: 3 years of famine, 3 years of being swept away before your enemies with their swords overtaking you, or 3 days of plague throughout Israel, the angel of the Lord sweeping through every part of Israel. David asks for mercy. He says, I can't choose. You choose for me. And God sent the plague. 70,000 men fell. As the angel was approaching Jerusalem, God's heart softened, and he told the angel to stop where he was, which was on the threshing floor of a man named Araunah. David sees the angel with his sword drawn and hand stretched out over Jerusalem, and he freaked. And a little after the fact, it seems to me, he says to God, why are you hurting these people? I'm the one who sinned. Let the plague fall on me and my family. Hold that thought. The angel then told Gad to tell David to build an altar right there on that threshing floor when the Aruna and his sons, they were there and they saw the angel and they were understandably shaken when David appears and then asks to buy the threshing floor. Can you imagine? You know, you're a miller, you're a farmer, and there is an angel of God, sword drawn, the king of Israel shows up. I want to buy your threshing floor. Okay. And the guy tries really hard to give it to David. David says, nope, nope, nope. I have to do this right. I have to pay for it. So he gives him a very handsome settlement for the threshing floor. And the guy says, take everything, take the ox, take the sled, take take everything. And right there, David built an altar and he sacrificed a burnt and a fellowship offering, which the Lord accepted. The Lord told the angel to put his sword away, and that was that. David apparently had wanted to go to the temple to the tabernacle in Gibeon, where the altar was, to talk to God, but he was afraid of the angel. So David decided then and there that the temple would be built right there, right on that spot. So the rest of First Chronicles literally is the story of David preparing for the temple to be built, knowing that he would not be the one to build it, but also determined to do what he could do to help the process. In chapter 22, we see David starting to begin this process. And like the strategist that he was as a military man, David starts to assemble what will be needed for the temple construction, both in terms of human capital and materials. He assembled all of the aliens. This is important. He assembled all of the aliens in Israel and from them appointed stonecutters to prepare dressed stone for the temple. Aliens were free to live in Israel, but they weren't citizens. They had no rights. And so they could be pressed into forced labor, basically, is what it was. And just hold that thought. He also collected wood and stone and iron and bronze in unbelievable amounts. I mean, think about how long ago this was. And they're talking about just thousands and, 30,000, 40,000, large amounts of pounds and cubits and so on and so forth of this stuff. As all of this was transpiring, David called Solomon to him and told him that it was his responsibility to build the temple, that God had told David that he had too much blood on his hands to do the work. But God also told him that he would have a son, David, would have a son named Solomon, who would be a man of peace and who would build the temple. God also revealed to David that Solomon will be his son, and Solomon will be his son, and he will be Solomon's father. And that God, will establish the throne of his kingdom over Israel forever. That's in chapter 22, verse 10. David then goes on to hope that the Lord will give Solomon direction and understanding, so that when God does put Solomon over all of Israel, that he will keep the law. And if he, Solomon, is careful to keep and follow the law, all will be well. Then there is a brief listing of what David had already prepared for them, and then prepared for Solomon. And then he basically says to Solomon, off you go. After he commissioned Solomon, he ordered all of the leaders of Israel to help him. not for Solomon's sake, but because of the graciousness and mercy that the Lord had shown them. This is all out of love and respect for the Lord. In chapter 23, when David was old and full of years, he made his son Solomon king over all Israel. He also gathered together all of the leaders of Israel, as well as the priests and Levites. All Levites 30 years old or more were counted, and the total number of men was 38,000. David said, of these, 24,000 are to supervise the work of the temple, 6,000 are to be officials and judges, 4,000 are to be gatekeepers, 4,000 are to praise the Lord with music. David then divided the Levites into groups corresponding to the sons of Levi, Gershon, Kohath, and Merari. Those families are then literally listed. You just go through name after name after name after name, clan head for the families within the clans. The descendants of Levi, who had been responsible for literally picking up the tabernacle and making sure that it got moved from point A to point B and reassembled, it was moved, assembled properly, used properly, disassembled, moved, and so on and so forth. Those guys don't have to do that anymore because they now have a temple. He changed their job to help the priests and the descendants of Aaron with the service of the temple. They became the building and grounds committee for the temple. They took care of all of that stuff. In chapter 24, there is a similar, very specific division of labor for the priests as the descendants of Aaron. Chapter 25 describes the families who will be responsible for the ministry of prophesying and music to accompany it. Ministry of prophesying. In chapter 26, we hear a discussion of the gatekeepers and the treasurers. Chapter 27 covers the army divisions and the officers of the tribes. I don't know, officers of the tribes. I guess just the elders of the tribes. And then finally, the king's overseers who are in charge of the royal storehouses. In chapter 28, we hear David's final address to the nation of Israel, in which he exhorts, great word not used nearly often enough, in which he strongly encourages the nation to follow the Lord and all the Lord's laws and commands. He tells them that God decreed that he was not to build the temple, but that his son Solomon, who will succeed him as king, will build the temple. He then does the same with Solomon and reminds him that the Lord chose him to build the temple. And he's doing this all with like all of Israel brought together. David then gave Solomon all the plans that the Spirit had put in his mind, and boy, he was thorough. He also gave instructions about the divisions of the priests and the Levites, etc., etc., etc. All this I have in writing from the hand of the Lord upon me, and he gave me understanding in all the details of the plans. First Chronicles chapter 28, verse 19. Chapter 29 then enumerates all that has been given to the building of the temple, and it's a lot. Whether they are resources that were basically given that David appropriated for the building of the temple, or whether it was stuff that he personally had given from his own wealth. And as I said, it's a lot. But then David also asked all of the Israelite people, and really what you're talking about are the clan heads, but it's still a boatload of people there. He asked all of them to consecrate themselves to the Lord and to give themselves to the building of the temple. And the leaders of the families, the officers of the tribes, the army commanders, and the officials in charge of the king's work, who were the ones that were gathered, all willingly gave. And again, it was a lot. And then they rejoiced. Then there was feasting and celebration. David finished this address with a lovely prayer, praising God, acknowledging God's power and majesty as well as mercy and generosity. God acknowledges that all blessings flow from God and again exhorts and he encourages the people strongly to keep their desire, their current fervor to be faithful to God forever, to keep all of God's laws and decrees. He finished by saying to that whole session, for lack of a better word, praise the Lord your God, and they all fell prostrate before the Lord and their outgoing king. Solomon, there's feasting and sacrifices and so on and so forth. They again acknowledge that Solomon is the king. This is the next day. They again acknowledge that Solomon is the king. He was anointed with oil. He sat on the throne in place of his father after everyone had pledged their allegiance. And the Lord exalted Solomon in the sight of all Israel and bestowed on him such as no king of Israel ever had before. And David died. We weren't there. We don't know. We have two different versions of the David story, but I do think that David was, in his heart of hearts, a very faithful and really deeply religious person. He loved the Lord, and as happens to all but the very, very, very strong of purpose, he got lost in the power. He got lost in all the power and all the wealth, and he made some terrible decisions, and it ruined his life. It's basically what it comes down to. It ruined his life. But I think that we really can see that he was a admirable leader. He was in many ways a just and good leader. Not in all ways, but in many ways, he was a just and good leader. And certainly, we're humans. We have feet of clay. We just do. But that doesn't mean there aren't characteristics that are admirable and worthy of mention and worthy to aspire to. And I do think it's interesting, as David was kind of tidying up his life, how much he, well, at least as, and I believe it also comes up in Samuel. He really is trying to keep Israel on the straight and narrow, as it were. He wants Israel to be God's people. He wants his son to be the king that he wasn't. Sadly, Solomon lets him down in an enormous way, because all of the sins of David were writ large in Solomon. The pride and the falling away. But that's for Second Chronicles. In the meantime, take good care. I hope that you had a great week. I hope you have a great week coming up. I should have said, I hope you and your families are taking care of yourselves or each other. and are all well. Wear your masks, stay in your bubbles. So hopefully we will be able to see each other sometime fairly soon. Fingers crossed. I do miss you, and I really, or I'd, in many cases, I would like to meet you, because I don't even know who's watching these things. But take good care. Bye.